RiseUp theme song, take 9. Answering the difficult and critical questions youth may face that relate to Mormon culture and teachings. This is the Rise Up podcast, produced by Fair Mormon. There are a lot of different opinions in the world today on chastity. When it comes to finding an answer, it's best that you go to the right sources. But what or who are those right sources?
I would like to talk about a subject that's probably not the most comfortable subject to talk about, and that is the subject of sex. Now, when I say that, I don't want everyone out there to get nervous. But what I would like to do is encourage the youth of seminary age or institute age to openly talk about sex, but to openly talk about it with the right people. I remember sitting on the couch with my mom. It was the summer right before I was getting ready to start high school. And my mom looked over at me and she said, "Well, Jimmy, you're starting high school." And I was watching the TV, kind of distracted, and I said, yeah, I am. And then my mom said, "Well, you better not get any girls pregnant, and you better only unzip your zipper if you're going to the bathroom." And I thought to myself, wow, am I getting a shortened version of the birds and bees talk with my mom? And that was the only conversation that I ever had about sex with my parents. Now, partially that is my fault. I was not comfortable speaking to my parents. But here I was, a boy who was maturing, hormones were kicking in, so of course I thought about sex. I had a ton of questions about sex. But luckily for me, I was the youngest of 6. By the time I got into high school, I had 2 older brothers who were already married and had started families. So I was able to turn to them and ask them questions. Because in my mind, my brothers who were married and were creating children with their wife knew a lot more about sex than some of my friends who were 1, virgins, and 2, their ideas of sex were the same as mine, which was slim to none. So what I would like to do is encourage youth today to develop a relationship of trust with your parents and to go to your parents and talk about any questions that you may have about sex. Because society today and the media today, they want to fill you with knowledge about sex that probably is a little extreme, is a little, I would say media friendly. Probably some of it's not very true because they want you to imagine things that sometimes are not going to happen. You're going to get married. You're going to start having sexual relations with your spouse, and you're going to think to yourself, you know what, this isn't what I read about in the magazines. This isn't what I saw on TV or commercials. Because in reality, sex is totally different than what we hear about in the mainstream media. That's why it's important now to openly discuss these issues of sex with our parents. My oldest, who is 11 years old, about to turn 12, I had the sex talk with him when he was 9 years old. I remember I was driving in my car and I got a call from my wife. And she said, "Jimmy, you need to come home quick. Carson is asking questions that are making me very uncomfortable." So when I got home, I asked Carson, "Well, what's going on?" And he flat out said, "I want to know about sex." So I asked him, "Well, you tell me what you know first." And I was floored. My 9-year-old knew quite a bit. And he asked some very detailed questions. and I gave him the answers. I didn't sugarcoat anything, but I gave him what I thought he was ready for. And afterwards, an amazing thing happened. He gave me a huge hug and said, "Thanks, Dad." And then there's been a couple times afterwards where he's had a question, and we've had great discussions about it. And you know what? It ended his curiosity. And every first Monday of the month, we have what's called a father-son or father-daughter interviews with my children. And I will ask them, "Hey, you have any more questions about sex or anything else that may be coming up in school, or questions that have come up as you've hung out with your friends?" And they'll shrug their shoulders and say no, or sometimes they'll ask me. And we have that open communication, and it has built a wonderful relationship. Because I want to tell you, seminary-age students and institute-age students, that it's not too late. You can develop that bond with your parents and talk about these issues. I know that you may think that, you know what, this would make my parents and me very uncomfortable. And you know what, at first, it probably will be. But just like Nephi came to his father Lehi when he broke his bow, even though Lehi was murmuring and his brothers were murmuring, and Lehi said, "Dad, you're the prophet. I'm going to come to you and ask you, where should I go to hunt food?" And what did that do? That humbled Lehi. He thought, here's my son who was shown all these visions earlier by angels and by the Spirit, has seen pretty much beginning to end as we are taught in the scriptures, and now he's coming to me when he could have probably gone to God himself and asked where he should go to hunt food. And so I would encourage you, ask your parents, have an open and honest conversation with them, because over time, it will get comfortable. I don't want to beat a dead horse with this subject, but I just cannot stress enough that as the youth of the church, go to our parents when we have problems and issues. We will develop that trust and relationship with them. We will develop a bond with them that will be immeasurable. How awesome that would be to just feel comfortable talking about any topic with your parents. And I want to leave my testimony with you that your parents love you, but more importantly, your Heavenly Father loves you. And He wants each of you to remain pure and clean. He wants you to experience sex at the right time and place, which is within the bonds of marriage.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Rise Up. This has been a production of Fair Mormon. This and other podcasts are available at fairmormon.org. The opinions expressed in this podcast are not necessarily the views of Fair Mormon or the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Please subscribe to our show in iTunes under the name Mormon Faircast. Questions or comments can be posted at blog.fairmormon.org in conjunction with this episode. Tune in each week for another episode of Rise Up. Thank you for listening.